Everyone, it's Adrienne here. I am just popping on to give you a quick synopsis of this month's, this quarter's podcast. I was looking back to see the last episode I did, which was probably about 6 months ago. So I'm popping on today. There's just a lot of things alive, and I just want to let you know that if you haven't visited the podcast before, welcome. If you're returning, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the podcast and why I created it. And so I titled this podcast Lifting the Veil because it served for me as a metaphor to point to the idea that the self as the mental function is a veil that keeps us separate from all the different dynamic layers of our being. And so today on the podcast, coming back after 6 months away, I'm going to be sharing with you about this week's topic regarding one, the energy of the update of what's going on right now in our world. And although I am not a professional astrologer, I have studied and loved and have had a passion for astrology most of my adult life. So I always pull in the astrological waters, the waves that are happening and how they are manifesting in the world. Because I guess at heart I am a mystic. I'm a Sufi mystic, and I live through signs and symbols. That's the way the divine speaks to me. That's how I make sense of the world, and I've always been that way. And so I use that to help myself interpret events and share those insights with all of you. And so it's a little window into the world as a miracle, the world as mysticism, the beauty of the unfoldment of life and how it's happening for us. And this is just my fundamental frame of reference that I tend to live in. And a lot of times it can seem for people, depending on more practical types who have suggested that I'm overly idealistic or somehow disconnected from reality. But for me, it's the most, I'm connected to the deepest level of reality that transcends, that is transpersonal. And so today, this week, this episode that I'm doing as my return after being away for some time is called, it's not personal, it's transpersonal. And so I'm going to be bringing in the astrology that's alive right now with the full moon in Virgo happening tomorrow, and how that's impacting not only the events on the world stage, but an entire shift in how we perceive ourselves, and that will shape our future. And so this is a futuristic episode as well. So I hope you can join me, grab a cup of tea, and I'll hope to see you in there. And I'll share some more updates about some events happening as well at the end of the podcast if you're interested. All right. See you in a few. Hi, everyone. It's Adrienne. I'm back. It has been a minute, and I haven't done any episodes for this podcast in, I was looking back, and it looks like about 6 months. So it's good to be back. I'm glad to see you. I've been taking my own sweet time. It's been a very internal time for me on many levels for many reasons. I've been doing a whole lot of molting, let's say, of internal psychological, physical structures that I've been holding on in my personality for, well, as long as I've known myself or that I remember knowing myself. And so it's been a turning over of the soil, and it's taken a lot of my focus and a lot of my energy. I've also been highly involved in doing a year-long field facilitation um, mentorship, which I told you about, as well as finishing up the year-long alchemy training, which has been its own medicine for me. And I think that this 6 months I've been really integrating all of this work, and I needed not that I haven't been interacting with people or connecting with people. I just needed some time away from the podcast. I needed some time away from sharing regularly on social media the way I had been, and really reassessing social media for myself. But I just felt it was time. So today I'm here, and this week's episode, as I mentioned in the intro, is it's not personal, it's transpersonal. And this is coming out of this scene that we've had on this on the world stage, largely in America, as you well know, for the past 7 weeks as we've ushered in a new presidency. And there's also been incredible astrological things happening. And so it's so interesting for me to look at the above as the below, because it's a mirror, and the themes are when I start tuning in, as I tuned into the themes of nature, because the planets are secular. No, they're secular. They're in a cycle. They're not secular. Well, I don't know. They might be secular, but that's besides the point. I don't really think the planets are secular or non-secular. They are part of the form of the material world that we live in, and they have cycles in nature. And of course, I think there's like a really good quote about the environment, and the environment is not outside of us. It's actually inside of our bodies, and it's reflected out. And so this full moon that we're having is in Virgo, which is rules the sixth house, which is business, service, daily schedule. And of course, it's represented by the Virgin. And I always like to think of this metaphor of the Virgin is that which is not separate from itself. There is no duality in it. It is pure consciousness unfolding. And in order to be in that state, the uncorrupted state, is to be able to discern between what is needed and what is not needed. And that's the chaff from the wheat. You often see the Virgin. There's very few people, like human characters, that are represented in the zodiac. Virgo is one of them. Aquarius is another. And I think that's it for the glyphs of astrology. But and it's a female. It's the mother, the goddess Gaia of the earth. And this theme of the purity of awareness, when it's in flow, when it naturally unfolds in the cycle of the daily happening. And this is different than, for example, the linear model we have of having a very scheduled clock and, being on a schedule and forcing a pattern onto nature. And so that Virgo full moon, and the full moon usually represents things that are coming into fruition, they're blooming into the fullness, or they're things that we're ending, like cycles ending. And that is in Virgo, depending on where you have Virgo in your chart, will be will will color those issues in that house. So for example, I have Virgo in my second house, which is traditionally ruled by Taurus, which is the house of values. And so for me, ironically, or not, depending how you look at it, we also are having a retrograde of Venus for 40 days and 40 nights. And Venus is in Aries, I believe, right now, or getting close to getting into Aries. And Aries is the house of the self, the I am. It's the physical construct, the psychological construct, this identity. And so with this Venus retrograde, Venus represents values and material wealth and the material reflection of what we value. But it's more than this. I am heavily influenced by Venus. Not only is my sun in the seventh house, which is ruled by Venus, but my Venus is also in the seventh house, which is ruled by Venus. And so, depending on your particular chart, these are transpersonal influences. I'm using my personal context to help illuminate them a little bit more. But Venus, everyone has retrograde Venus right now for 40 days and 40 nights, and it's in Aries for everyone. So this is a revaluing and determining what is of worth for us in our self-construction, how we perceive ourselves to be. And so there's this influx of this Virgo purification energy coming through into that is touching the retrograde of Venus in regards to reevaluating the way we relate, like our sense of self relates to the material world, how we consume resources, how we use resources. And so there's that dynamic. And then there's the next dynamic, which is opposite Virgo full moon, where the South Node is. South Node is our fate. That means the imprints and habitual ways of being that we brought into this life, things that we automatically have an affinity for, that we're good at, that are easy for us, is in opposition to the sun in Pisces. And so, as I mentioned in a post last month, I believe, or earlier in the month, this Pisces Virgo opposition is the victim perpetrator identity shaped by these archetypes of victim perpetrator. Because if we have a victim and a perpetrator, we're going to need a hero. And I can't remember the name of the psychologist that created this or identified the triangle, the ego triangle, that's what I call it, of the perpetrator, victim, and hero cycle, which is at some level dehumanizing because it doesn't really allow people into their full power. If we're going to have a perpetrator, we're automatically going to have a victim. And this is what sets up the narcissist empath dynamic that so many people have been using this language. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, a product of a power dynamic that is based on a way of valuing or creating value in our world, which is largely capitalism at this time. And we're seeing it in America as there's like all of these distorted mirrors, hypocrisies, inability to keep things where they belong historically, really difficult to have any grounded, informed debate about what's really happening because capitalism has distorted the value of the virgin, of the purity of our relationship to nature and to each other. And so we're having all of these, looks like a fun house of crazy mirrors, but it doesn't really feel fun for a lot of people. But this, I want to say this monster or this production, that's really what it's been, a production that has kept capitalism going, or it actually reflects the values of capitalism, is coming apart at the seams. And of course, it's messy and of course, it's chaotic. And there's incredible uncertainty and fear. And people trying to articulate and try to put things in order, and they just won't stick. And there's all sorts of hypocrisy and and people on totally having different perspectives, like two different, complete, utter different views of the same event. And I've heard this more than once, and probably you have too. Maybe you've even said it yourself. Like, how can the stark contrast of one event exist on so many different levels? And so this is one symptom of the power structures that were created by duality that are self, and I don't want to say self, right? It's kind of, I always believe that everything in the outside world is a reflection of what's happening internally for us, not only individually, but as a collective consciousness. And today I came upon a clip of a woman who is an artist in, I believe it's Tasmania. And she created this art exhibition in protest to some of the ways that some of the laws in Tasmania and how the women were being treated. And she created something called the women's, I think it was called the Ladies' Lounge. And there weren't any any men allowed. And of course, there was probably some wealthy businessman or philanthropist that sued her because he didn't think it was fair that he wasn't allowed in the ladies' lounge. And so the whole court case became a theatrical art piece of art and statement. And I just love her quote about the case. And I want to read it to you because I think it says so much. Her name is Kersha Kashel. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And it's from an interview from her, the court case, and how it was really a way for her to bring art and politics together in the most unusual, ironic way. Anyhow, this is what she says. She says, by taking a holistic system approach, which sounds serious, but really it's just the art of problem solving, because everything is connected. Adjusting one element of a system can bring the entire system into alignment, making space for nature to do what it does, emerge. Emergence is nature being itself, and I'm endlessly awed by it. And this applies to art too. I tried to explain this to the judge with the phrase, God is the curator. Isn't that just, I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, that was just like the most beautifully articulated expression of a metaphor and model for living in true liberation. And we've learned it. We can learn it by looking at nature, because private ownership, the hoarding of resource, the extraction of resource by certain small groups of people that are then selling those resources back to the people in which those resources belong. And they've been doing it as long as capitalism and colonialism has existed. And so I don't think it's by chance at this moment in time that the specter of colonialism and capitalism are showing the cracks, the imperfections, the hypocrisy, the racism, the bias, the repression of certain groups of people so other people could justify owning, right? Race as a marker, gender as a marker to justify this private ownership and the dismissing or devaluing of different people based on either their race or their gender. Anyways, I did my whole master's thesis on that, oddly enough, and now I am here talking about it with you. So this brings me to this last piece, which is the sun in Pisces, where the North Node is. And the North Node represents the destiny, our destiny, whether it's a collective destiny or individual destiny. And they're tied together because we're not separate. And so this North Node is in Pisces. And Pisces has historically represented the unconscious, the dream world, the imagination, also delusion and craziness and drug addiction and that sort of delusion. And it's a fine line, right, between genius versus insanity. And so those are the two fish swimming. And when they're out of balance, it causes this balance to be thrown off into one duality or the other side of the duality. And so as this is happening, Neptune, which rules Pisces, which is in Pisces right now, is moving into Aries, where Virgo is, which is the sign of I am. And so it's almost like the dusting of hands, the ending of a cycle, the whole idea that America was a dream. And that is part of the mythology, the American dream. And it feels like, I don't know, you'll have to tell me how it feels for you. It feels like we are waking up as a collective, like it or not, wherever you are on the political spectrum, it doesn't really matter. All of us are waking up from the dream that this country was created on. And we are moving into the Aries, that Neptune is moving into the Aries, which is, how do we dream up a new version of self that is complex and dynamic enough, and a sense of self that will allow us to create and dream up something that's more in alignment with not just the individual self, but the self in context of all the big picture of everyone. And so that's really the piece that's really the piece that's happening right now. So I just wanted to share that with you for whatever it's worth. I hope that it makes sense to you. And so then after that, I wanted to go into the next piece, which is about the regenerative piece. And I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but for me, it has to do with what I call unlearning or deconditioning a lot of the ways that we've perceived ourselves. And so, to clarify that, I like to use the image of like a scaled down version, or even like an anemic or starved version of this idea of the self that has been so narrowed into like the let's see, like the almost like a mono existence based on the conceptual mind. So, what happens if we expand our idea of what the self is and what becomes available when we do that? And so, much of our thinking in the Western or European Western educational systems that many of us grew up in place us in this fragmentation of the mind. And it's like this mechanistic, linear, reductionist model when we're actually so diverse and complex and we have so many layers of being. And when we're forced to operate on just this thin thread of the mind, we're actually in a certain level of poverty. And so if our mind and our spirit and our psychosomatic awareness is like offline because we don't even know it's available, we're living in a form of poverty. So it would make sense that we also experience it outside of us. And you could argue that this is that this is true for some people and not true for others, considering, like, for example, I don't know how many billionaires there are in the world right now. I think last time I looked, it was like 634, but I could be mistaken. So there's this mass distortion between who has the resources and who doesn't. And so I'm talking about this inequality that exists. Well, some people have an over like flowing abundance and some people barely can survive. And so this creation of this inequality, this imbalance is what I'm talking about. And so if we continue to problem solve from that worldview, I think it was Einstein. I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but somebody really famous and really smart once said something like, we can't solve the problem from the level of consciousness which made the problem. And so this has been the case for government. You can see it happening right now. It's been a problem for people that are trying to solve climate change issues. It's like using the same lens to solve a problem creates 10 more problems. Like, you solve one problem, but you create 10 more different problems. And this is known as iatrogenic. I hope I said that correctly. And that is just what happens when, I guess the original definition came from when somebody goes to see a doctor and they're giving a medical procedure, and the medical procedure helps one ailment, but it causes an injury of a different type. And that's what's happening through the lens of capitalism now. So the reason why I shared that quote with you about Kirsha Cashel is because she's talking about a different view. And this is where life itself wants us to recover our own regenerative nature. And you may have heard this term a lot. It is the new version of sustainability. And so I won't bore you with the definitions. You can Google it and you can see the definitions between sustainable versus regenerative. But the argument is that human beings are regenerative by nature. We are part of nature. And what happens when a system comes in and separates us from nature, we lose access to our birthright as regenerative beings. So this is a matter of reestablishing what it means to be an individual I on the planet right now. And this shifts our view of what's of value. And as we shift our idea of what we value, no longer will necessarily wealth be defined as private ownership. It will allow us to go deep below the surface to the idea of what is wealth itself. And so some of you might know, I don't know, but I've been a lifelong student most of my adult life of yoga, the Vedanta, the Yoga Sutras, and mostly just yogic philosophy. And so I've been really fascinated about the whole pantheon of Hindu gods and specifically goddesses. Because in the Western world, we've had a very limited view of the divinity as a feminine aspect. But I want to bring in this model because I think it's an antidote to how many of us were taught to view the world. And there's three main goddesses that I connect with strongly. And the first one is Lakshmi. And she has been my teacher for a long time. When I first found out about the goddess Lakshmi, I was just so excited, so elated, so tickled because I had no idea. I didn't know about the goddesses of the Hindu tradition until I started studying yoga. And when I first found about Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, I was super happy. And she's been my teacher ever since. And I've told this story before, and maybe you've heard it. So I won't bore you, but I'll tell you the quick version. I think I was in Santa Barbara, and I went to a used bookstore because I was thinking, I bet this bookstore might have some books about Lakshmi, and I want to understand more about her and her power and what she does. Anyhow, I walked in there and I'm looking around, and the woman in the store walks up to me and says, she's an Indian woman, and she said, "Can I help you with something?" And I was kind of feeling self-conscious and embarrassed because she was Indian and I'm like, oh, not. And I didn't want to tell her that I was looking for a book on Lakshmi. So I said, no, I'm just looking around. And she said to me, okay, well, let me know if you need anything. My name is Lakshmi. And I think my eyes probably like popped out of my head. And I was just like, oh, okay, thank you. And so ever since then, me and Lakshmi have had this incredible relationship I appreciate her. And that was kind of like, I feel like her winking at me and saying hello. So anyhow, I bring up the goddess of Lakshmi because I think she's a really great model for how we can focus our attention on wealth through what many different philosophers, I won't list their names right now, have talked about as a gift culture. And our current system is run on scarcity and lack, and it causes a really narrow definition of abundance and wealth. But I think that the major hurdle we have as a collective is the current system. In order for some people to have what they need, other people have to do without. And so it focuses on matching scarcity with scarcity instead of what Lakshmi offers, which is love, abundance, and generosity as our nature. And I think Carl Jung just said, I guess what I'm wanting to connect here is Carl Jung, who of course was a product of the Western tradition, was also a strong student of the yogic and the Hindu gods and goddesses. And he said, there are 4 types of knowing in this world: sensing, intuiting, feeling, and thinking. And of course, somatic science and neuroscience has been studying how people know, relate, and understand the world. Some people would say there's more than 4 types of knowing, but I mention this because when we reduce everything down to the mono mind or the monocultural mind, we really restrict our wealth of being. And this takes me back to what I first said at the beginning of this talk today, which is that this energy that's moving through the field right now is really asking us to expand our definitions of our self-concepts. And as we do that, as we open and expand our minds to all the information and all the levels of complexity and expression of who we are, then that opens our relationship to value out in the world. And the second goddess that I wanted to share with you today is, I hope I say her name right. I always mispronounce it. Swarovski. And she represents the true notion of knowledge. So as we take Carl Jung's definition of not just the conceptual way of knowing, but on the multiple levels of what makes us human, we can more readily access the deepest notion of knowledge, which can't be refined or constricted to just our conceptual realm. And so this is where our current education system is based on specialized knowledge, which becomes super limiting because it removes us from the context of the entirety of the ecosystem that we live in. And I know that this was meant to serve one degree or the next, but instead it's often come at an expense to the entirety of our community and the collective experience. And it privileges the mind over the heart and the hands and the home, which have been traditionally the feminine domains of care. And it is these domains of care that have been the foundational rock for each individual to root themselves, their sense of self, including all of the dysfunction that is seated there. The dysfunction that is also seated in there as well in the home. And part of this dysfunction, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, is a product of this imbalance and dismissive use of power that has power over versus power with, and of course the system, the exploitive, extractive nature of capitalism that has shaped our sense of self to be a reductive model, and has kept us from our own internal resource. And so the last goddess that I want to share with you is the goddess Shakti, who is an incredible representative of power as I come to speak of different models of power. In capitalism, the power is has been in a certain economic class. Those people that make the decisions shape the world. In fact, you can see it right now across the stage of our planet. We have a billionaire who is changing, and not just him, right? Changing the ecological state of nature to create his own product. So he's appropriating large pieces of the natural world and has given carte blanche to do that at the expense of all the people that are affected by his action. And this has been done on so many levels of natural resource, including water, oil, minerals, right? And not just in this country, but across the world. That has been the model of colonialist extraction that has caused the oppression of many countries across the world. And now, right now in the US, we are seeing it's always been there, but we're actually the veil is being pulled back. We're actually seeing the extent of which it's happening in this country. While we were given an impression, or we were sold a bill of sale, or we were given a myth about American greatness, but at what cost and on the back of who? And so Shakti gives a alternative model that's not scalable or comes with force or extraction or domination or competition or comparison, but that it operates the fundamental depth of our humanity. It is not personal, it's transpersonal. It goes beyond duality of opposites, where there's you and me, or us and them, and the competition, right? One must win above the rest. And it's this sort of sport, competitive view of the world that keeps some people winners and some people losers. And usually it's the people that with the money that have accumulated more wealth that determine who that is. And so this whole shift in the world right now is asking for a more inclusive, viable model of all of these key factors of wealth, of knowledge, and of power. So people aren't feeling like victims, paralyzed through fear and control, which stop people from acting in their best interest as advocate for themselves and for the people around them. It stops them from acting through and seeing the options and the potentials available, and putting their power into politicians that actually are just as constricted in a system, because it's based on a value system, an economic value system that excludes the humanity of the people involved. And so this shift in values is a matter of beginning to perceive and relate to the idea of self in a more comprehensive way that can hold a new sense of self, so I can find a new way to relate with you. And of course, to the value system and how it operates in the world right now through money and a capital system. And so this is really, for me, at the base of what's being called by life itself to be expressed through us. And the sky, as I mentioned, is an incredible map to help us chart our course and really to like reaffirm our own intuition, our own instinct, our own knowing, and to have the courage and confidence to unlearn many of the things that are no longer at service of our well-being, let's say, on all levels. So that's what I really wanted to share with you here in this episode. And I want to thank you so much for joining me. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts and your take on things that are occurring. I would really love to hear what resonated with you. Was there something that really like touched your heart and made you go, oh my gosh, or got a thought moving or a inspiration in you, let's say. And lastly, I want to say, I just wanted to remind you of a couple of things. If you're local to Portland, starting March 25th is the Portland New Earth School, and I will be teaching a 6-week class called The Care Shop, which is a curriculum to support you in expanding your idea of self based on building greater somatic awareness and awareness of your nervous system. So we can start befriending all of these layers of ourself and bring them into our consciousness to help us operate more consciously as a whole in the spirit of creating a regenerative culture for ourselves. And next week on Monday, I have my in-person Golden Thread Somatic Circle here at my home. The link for the registration I'll put in the description of this recording. And I also have the online version the following Thursday. So the in-person is March the 17th, Monday night at 6 p.m. And the online version is Thursday the 20th at 6 p.m. as well. And that's an 1.5 hour event. So if you are local, I'd love to see you Monday night. If you're not local and you'd like to attend, please join me online on Thursday. And I'll also put the link to that event in the description of this podcast this week. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to share with you? Oh, yes. I am also putting together a toolbox for energetic intuitives, or let's just say intuitives. And it's a toolbox to help you ground your energy and help you clear your energy, and tools to help you distinguish between your own energy and other people's energy. And it also I'll also be sharing tools with you for clearing the energetic pollution that many of us have collected throughout our lifetime, And as we do these practices together, there's so much healing that happens, because a lot of times these energy structures, these psychic, mental, and emotional structures, they're energetic, and they keep us in particular perceptions, ways of relating, worldview that aren't always in our best interest, and because they keep us limited in certain ways. So I'm going to be offering that at the end, I want to say beginning of April, for spring. It's like a spring cleaning of our psychic, emotional, energetic closet. And we're going to do it together. And I think it will be 6 weeks. And I haven't decided what night. I think it might be Wednesday evening. And I think I'm going to do it. I don't know if I'm going to do it online or in person. Maybe I'll do both. I'll provide it in person, and then if you're not local, you can join us via the interweb, and that way everyone can attend that wants to attend. So I will keep you posted. Keep your eyes peeled for that, if that sounds something that you're interested in. It's such an important time for so many of us to get fully grounded in our bodies in a way that feels safe, supported, and expansive. And that's really what I'm about. So with that, I think I will leave it there. If you stop by, say hello, let me know that you were here. Until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are, and bye for now.